Volkanovski. Oh my, what do you do, right? I'm the guy that you guys would come to. If you needed any PR or marketing work, and you could get on the phone with the biggest firm in the world, or you could get on the phone with 30 minutes with Chael, you would choose Chael. I am the best of the best. The experts paid for this. Come to me. For good reason. I understand I have a skill in it. I get it. I follow the sport. Okay. I don't have the solution to Volkanovski. All I've got is a whole pile of here's what he's doing and it's not working. I got a whole pile of that. Now, I'm talking about building a star. People don't know what a Volkanovski is. It's like when Arnold Schwarzenegger came to America, he would not let his last name go of Schwarzenegger. He was proud of it. He wanted to represent it. And everybody who was anybody, he had no money. He had nowhere to live. He had no connections in this business, but he would refuse to do that. Say, listen, first off, you're an Austrian with an accent. That's not going to get on TV or film over here. And second, even if you were to make it through the grace of God, they can't put Schwarzenegger on a billboard. You simply cannot be a marquee guy. You got too many syllables in your last name. That might sound simple, guys. The biggest stars out there have changed their name for that very reason. It's just something that rolls off the tongue easier. I bring that to you because Volkanovski isn't easy. Okay, now we're certainly not going to fault him for that. I'm just going to bring it up. Now, if you have a Volkanovski and anybody in the world happens to know what a Volkanovski is, could they pick a Volkanovski out of a room? No. Could fight fans pick a Volkanovski out of the room? A lot of them, but no, not an absolute. Not an absolute. Not the most recognizable guy. So now you have a guy who isn't completely recognizable, which is the absolute only thing against him because his skills are off the charts, and he changes his appearance by shaving his head. Do you know how frustrating you would be if you were the executive producer of a television show and that happened? Think of anybody, guys. Absolutely anybody. Think of your favorite actor. Think of them. Barbara Streisand, Susan Sarandon, Ed Norton, Mark Wahlberg, Denzel Washington. I mean, think of your best, the best of the best, the Gary Oldmans, the Daniel Day-Lewises of the world, the absolute best of the best. Let's say you hired them. Let's say you paid them. Let's say you gave them their quote, which was $20 million, and they show up on their very first day, and they got a beard coming down like Duck Dynasty, and they shaved their head. Do you know how pissed off you are going to be as a director? If my job is to go out there and put a face to this, you don't know anything about the script, you don't know the cinematography, you don't know if we did a good job, you don't even know what our budget is. I got one face to attach to my product. I paid full rate for him, and he showed up looking like somebody else. That movie would not start. They would send everybody home, have him shave the beard, and call me in 3 months when your hair grows back. It's a very real thing when I bring up this point. When a guy whose biggest problem is that people don't know who he is in a star-driven business, and he changes what he looks like, okay, let's just accept it. What are you going to do? Just start grooming a guy? You tell a guy with a long last name that his last name's no good? No, of course not. You're going to tell him that he can't get a hit? No, of course not. You're going to deal with it. Because we have something bigger in this sport, which is what do you represent? So now you have a guy representing Australia, draped in an Australian flag, shouting out to all the Aussies, who's representing New Zealand. He's part of City Kickboxing, who is in the rival country to his own country. And you go, okay, I'm a little bit confused here. I'm just confused. I can work with it. But I don't know what it is we're branding. So are we branding great skills at 145 pounds? Okay, nobody's ever been able to do that themselves. However, on occasion, you can brand a great fight at 145 pounds. So who are we going to fight? Volkanovski, it sounds like I just give Volkanovski a hard time. Not in the least. Not in the least. I'm seeing a guy here who is a star like no other. I'm seeing Michael Jordan-esque talent. Two fighters in history have been able to draw on their own regardless of who their opponent was. Their skills were not as good as Volkanovski's. That's how good he is, guys. He's not losing fights. He's not losing rounds. He's not losing moments. He just took on a guy called a zombie. Zombie earned that moniker and gets to be called zombie because he can walk through anything. He couldn't walk through Volkanovski. This is a whole nother level that you're dealing with here. So you're going to close out the show. You're going to be the main event of a card that you were the third most popular fight. And make no mistake, it's not an insult to anybody. There was 4 athletes that competed after Chimaev. Everybody that bought a ticket and came there came to see Chimaev. It's just one of these really hard spots that you're in. But you're going to do it with an Australian flag representing kickboxing out of New Zealand with a haircut that you've never had before against, I mean, you see where stuff just starts to get tough. Like, how are we marking this and how are we branding? Okay, great. He's not going to be the Michael Jordan that gets to live on his own, so let's get him another partner. Well, who are we going to put in there with him? There's only one guy alive that could captivate the imagination that he could be able to beat him. That's Max. How many times do we have them fight? I do think we're going to see Max Volkanovski part 3. I do think that we should see part 3. But I would not be remiss to ask you the same question all you guys want to know, which is, where does a win get you? Where does a loss take you? Because it would seem as though if Max wins, he then has to give Volk the 4th fight. And if Max wins again, then you got to go to the tiebreaker of part 5. I mean, I'm bringing up a very fair question. How many times are we going to have those guys fight? Some fights just make sense. Some fights you just have to do. That fight makes sense. You have to do that fight. But what do we do next? And now you start to see where it gets a little bit tough on Volkanovski. Now, Volkanovski doesn't think that I'm wrong. It never dawned on him until he just heard me say it, that he's rapping in Australia while representing New Zealand. He's never thought about, people know who I am with a short haircut. He's now a little bit pissed off that I said it, but he's seen that I'm right. So he's willing to put his rod out there. He's been dangling his rod in this water for a little while. As recently as 2 weeks ago, when he's got a fight coming up against Zombie, which was not the fight promised, and it's not even the most looked after fight on the card, right? He's supposed to put everything into this fight. He went a totally different direction, which is to call out Conor McGregor. I don't blame him. He has got to start trying some stuff. If Volkanovski gets so damn good, because he is approaching Jose Aldo territory, I believe he's past it. I believe Volkanovski to be the greatest 145-pounder the world's ever seen. I believe Volkanovski to be the second best fighter the world has right now. Second only to Kamaru Usman, who's in conversations going head-to-head with George St. Pierre for the best ever. I mean, it's a really hard time to be the best fighter in the world, and he's currently ranked number 2. In what I believe to be the hardest weight class of 145, you could have that argument between 55, but you couldn't go any further than that. I mean, I think it's an incredible feat what he's done. Not to mention fighting a guy who he's a 7-1 favorite over, so there's no upside to this. And he puts that guy, in this case Korean Zombie, into an experience and environment unlike any other. Volkanovski just turned the heat all the way up. That's all he did. How long can you stay in this heat before you catch fire? Okay, boom, the fire's caught, stop the fight. That's what happened. Going into the 4th and final frame, I'm sure you guys saw this, but if you did it, I want to make sure that you're aware of it. Volkanovski says to Zombie when they meet in the middle, he said, "You want to do this?" And Zombie said, "Yeah." And Volkanovski didn't accept it on his face. And he said, "Are you sure?" And Zombie said, "Yeah." That is one of the more compelling things I've ever seen my time in this industry. That was a man who was completely in control of his environment, period. 7-1 favorite. All the energy from the crowd was sucked out 2 fights ago. Got to go out and take care of this just so we can get on to what's next. No opponent waiting for him unless Max. I mean, it's one of these things that a lot of people would have crumbled under. Not only did Volk not crumble, Volk didn't flinch. Not only did Volk not flinch, it might have been his best performance. If I'm going to let you pick from a body of work of Volkanovski, and I tell you, now here's the bad news, I'm going to insert you as one of these opponents. I'm going to insert you over Volkanovski's career as one of his opponents, and you're going to have to go through that. The one that you don't want to be is the one that Volkanovski just did. That was the worst beating he put on anybody. It's very appropriate that he said to him, "Do you want to go?" and did not accept the answer. And only as a means to justify what he knew he was going to have to do to complete his job under the terms that he agreed to, he made him say it a second time, "Are you sure?" This wasn't tough talk. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't meant for anybody to be here. This was one sportsman to another, one opponent to another. It's a very incredible moment. Volkanovski has star written all over him. He just has long path. Chuck Liddell got over to where kids were finally putting mohawks and handlebars on and going out as the Iceman for Halloween. No fighter had ever been, 2 fighters in history, Rampage Jackson, because you could get the chain, and Chuck Liddell, because you could do the hair, are the only fighters that anybody has ever dressed up for as Halloween. I think that proves my point. Chuck was over. Chuck was the most recognizable fighter on the planet. He was that same guy for 4 years until he got there, and he was just a weird adult that had a mohawk. Right? Like, it's not cool till it is. It doesn't work until it does. Volkanovski will get there. Volkanovski is the guy. This is remarkable how good he is, and he's getting better. I just think that what Volk said 2 weeks ago when he started looking at Conor, I think he's going in the right direction. He's going to have to get the hell out of 145 pounds if he wants to truly be the main event. We can keep walking him out last, but he's not going to be on a card that sells out an arena. It's just not. There's too many things against it. Most primarily is the opponent. Not because those guys aren't great. Because Volk has done such a body of work that he can't make us believe that we don't know the outcome to the fight. Which is where switching weight classes comes in handy. What do you do with a guy? How do you switch a guy weight classes? So you got to leave this belt behind? Are we doing champ? Does everybody just get to do the champ thing, right? It starts to get weird. It starts to get hard to do. Now, new blood can rise up very quickly. A new 45-pounder can come up very quickly, and we're having a totally different conversation. I'm speaking to the pieces that we have on the board right now, the information that's in front of us. Volkanovski just put out what's probably going to be his worst fight, just because he won't be in a worse atmosphere. He just won't. 7-1 favorite, last-minute replacement, not the fanciest guy in the building, nowhere to go. It's a tough environment. He won 20 minutes of a 20-minute fight. He put one of the great beatings on an athlete who we all respect. He made an athlete that we all respect quit fighting. The guy got a nickname because the guy never quits fighting. We got the skills, man. We got the work. We're going to need to now get the audience. We're going to have to figure out how to do that. And second, looking for an opponent. It's not time for Volkanovski to leave 145 behind. That's very premature. For Volkanovski, who started this, not me, Volkanovski started the conversation about taking on somebody at 155. That's interesting. Conor's not the guy. But the guy is out there. Volkanovski's put his rod into the pool. He's starting to see what's going to bite. But when I tell you how good Volkanovski is, Volkanovski's so good that he's a 45-pounder that just insulted 155, and not one of them stepped forward and said, I'm your guy. That's when you know how dominant you are. When you can attack a whole nother division and not one of them is willing to step forward and come see me first. So Volkanovski's got a couple of problems. He's got a couple of conflicts he has to get through, but he's in a very good spot. I think that he's just the guy to do it. I'm trying to fast track him. I'm trying to get his popularity to meet his skills, which are currently the second best on earth. Does anybody disagree with me?